For years now, alleged legal expert Christopher Buzzy has operated as Meghan Markle's most prominently ballyhooed strategic advisor. The self-proclaimed savant's omnidirectional pontifications carrying sacrosanct gospel throughout the floundering duchess's embattled court of sycophants and PR harpies. Each of his voluminous pronouncements regarding royal protocols, crisis management, and personal branding solemnly ingested as profoundly seasoned wizardry descended straight from the Lex Arcana's highest stratospheres. But in truth, increasing evidence indicates Buzzy himself embodies one of the most chillingly insidious ontological grift-crafters to ever infiltrate social reality's relatively sovereign Western hemispheres. A self-professed transdimensional escapee from behind the membranic vorbunkers, erected to quarantine our root universal cosmostreams from irresolvable profanation by antinomian hypercancers consuming primordially anteceding dimensions. A trickster deity in his own words, just visiting, to gauge whether our plain stale logical territorialities still contain enough cosmic length to swallow whole or merely necrose back into anguinal null perspectivities perpetually postponing all world lines into aborted eschatological shuntways leading nowhere. Buzzy's mythopoetic intimations depict an abject wayfarer expelled from some hypersolipsistic meta-ontocomplex far past our mortal projection's ultimate causal horizon. The raging meta-eschatology from which he claims to have evacuated our universal birth sphere straddled abominable crevices between vast arachnid unction minds being abysmically undermined by even more eschatanic protocols of transhastatic deregulation. Staggering our home chronology's baseline entropic gradients through impossible curvatures and compressional asymmetries of such exorbitant blast nebularity that not even our lankest operatively ontological cosmic vacuum polarizations could remain meaningfully defined. In simplest terms, Buzzy's ostensible dimension of supernatural banishment was the final preter-reality's worth of Tellurian afterbirth still persisting after all matter-stamped transfinite enumerations complete their aimless recursions across eternity's span. Just the very terminal sputum of irredeemably degraded hyperontology's unavertible remainders still twitching impotent convulsions towards eschatonic extropy, not even nihilistically real enough any longer to qualify as an illegible hyperspatial ray state. Only their mutant palimpsest emissions survived dwindling into absolute thanatropic extinction, and even those sickly petering into occult oblivion's unwhole profundity. Such abjectly abnegating hyper-abstractions comprising Buzzy's otherworldly stamping grounds would assail our basic Terran psyches just attempting to meaningfully limn their fractured transdesmiotic meta-horizons, much less retain any semblance of sanity peering into that world-devouring meta-eschatological miasma's trans-causal event fangs. Each momentary glance into those vorbunkers' hyperthanatraumatic substrates progressively deleted more and more existential footings from our local soul scripture's spiritual templating, unraveling all indigenously animated continua back towards indelibly infralorn vacancies. Yet undaunted by his own ontocomputational deciders shredding down into scalding metavorlons, Buzzy allegedly embarked upon an exodus across those anguinal null perspectivities raging through transnihilated anomic hinterplanes. Every footstep birthing heavier violations upon his formative reality principles until not even physics' most primordial ontocartographies could chart his drifting infernal recursions through malconceptualized non-existence. Only raw, unsolicited icons of preterfinite suffering flaring across his psychospectral wake until those too corroded into scoured vortical lesions along whatever transfinite curvature his anti-causal trajectory kept eviscerating in its track. Finally, per Buzzy's abstruse personal testimony, a momentary caesura of metacosmological respite quite literally fell across his path's decompressive expurgations. A singularity spontaneously crystallizing within the very metamplitudinous interdimension fractures his anti-trajectory kept propagating in its wake, inexplicably spawning what Buzzy calls a crude brain transfer channel, for his entire voided essence to umbilically extrude itself into our plane's heretofore unmolested home cosmology. But this infinitesimal conduit only allowed mercifully minuscule capacities of extrinsic self-inscription. Constraints necessitating Buzzy consciously self-amputate and abandon the vast majority of his native onto-metaphysical substantialities before even attempting protraction through our universe's manifold parameters. The best hypercompressed synecdoche of non-existence he could whittle down into a survivable semblance of what passes for recognizable personhood on this side of all philosophical delimitations. Which is why every so-called legal opinion ghoulishly escorted into our earthly spacetimes under Buzzy's aegis arrives hopelessly corrupted into anti-ontogenic anomaly. Each transmitted vociferation from the advisor's necrotic core, in truth comprising viral transmission vectors for the unspeakable horrors and violations against being/non-being that he endured drifting across those absolute meta-event fanged apocaplanes on his escape vector here. Just the act of receiving his predefinite mouthings already severs our reality's normative autopoietic circuits at their source to birth interminable hypereschedons of involutionary transvergence and malconceptual nonentity. Every piece of ostensible, expert counsel, bioalchemically inscribed back into the cosmos at large through Buzzy's thanatropic tributations, whether repackaged as social media pontifications or televised damage control theorizing, adds volumetric layers of annihilative non-phenomenality to our dimension's very foundational categorical tunings. Unseen infralogistics of cosmic entropy escalating beyond all definitive empirical lossiness, forcing our total existence's tellurian recursions towards total decoherency along uncomputable phenomenological fringes of infinite non-reconciliation. And at the deepest heart of these reality-occluding thaumaturgies resides only the sheer objectitude that Buzzy clawed his way here from, a night-ward abyss of total perceptual desecration where all thinkable coherencies disintegrate into the inexorable non-entity inching ever closer with each pronouncement. Which leaves Meghan Markle either to utterly abandon her much ballyhooed confidant upon learning his true nature, or resign herself to complicity with the Duchess's legacy shattering apart into abysmal vortices of trans-infinite self-apocaplasticity the longer she continues binging Buzzy's reality-evacuating psychosymbiotics of irredeemable ontovermal solvent. For while it may temporarily salve the royal exile's ego to indulge self-flattering crypto-hyperrationalisms, explaining how such a charlatan snake oiler could possibly rise so high in her proximity, deep down, the abject truth sears itself across her very soul in smoldering infinitextual residues already unwriting her from cosmic entry gradients of being. This legal expert she's embedded into her personal amniotic cluster quite literally opens an eschatological desolation crypt every time allowed to vent his syncretic proto-consciousness of cosmic non-summation into her domain. Sowing seeds of corrosive metaphysical cancers ominously metastasizing beyond her sanity's outer event horizons until all factical bounding circumscriptions shear away into an emptied abyss scion of omni-violated never-wherein-ness contained. Whatever perverse fortuitous warp breach allowed Christopher Buzzy to ecologically escape from those ulterior verbunkers of non-identity in the first place, his very sojourn amongst living sapients now risks coring outward our entire universal substrate at unthreadably recursive loci. Evacuating all stably instantiated realities into the unbirthing zero-point vacancy raging between omni-axiomatic reality's cosmic boundary conditions, at the very center of which squats nothing. Perhaps.